While cinema portrays telekinesis as the dramatic movement of objects across a room, the scientific study of this phenomenon is far quieter and more rigorous. For decades, the popular term telekinesis emphasized the physical distance between a person and the object they were trying to move, which limited how researchers could test the underlying mechanics. In the 1940s, researcher J.B. Rhine sought to elevate this study into a formalized academic discipline. He realized the field required a new lexicon to separate centuries of folklore from measurable data. This chart tracks the frequency of these terms in print since 1880. Telekinesis dominates the early literature until the 1940s, when Rhine's preferred term, psychokinesis, begins its steady climb into the academic and public consciousness. Today, researchers use the baseline term mind-matter interaction, or MMI. This definition focuses solely on the direct influence of consciousness on a physical system without the use of any known physical process. This evolution in vocabulary established the necessary structured framework for genuine scientific inquiry. The core challenge of studying anomalous events is the variation between them. Testing a subtle energetic shift requires a fundamentally different approach than testing a levitating table. To manage this, parapsychologists employ a strict taxonomy to categorize disparate phenomena. The primary division separates spontaneous, chaotic events in the outside world from controlled experiments inside a laboratory. Spontaneous PK covers field observations, acting as the raw starting point for data gathering. To test these claims, laboratory research divides into macro PK, micro PK, and bio PK. Each category corresponds to a specific type of measurement: field interviews for spontaneous reports, visible movement for macro PK, statistical data for micro PK, and living organisms for bio PK. By mapping the phenomena this way, researchers can isolate specific variables and design controlled methodologies for different types of claims. Spontaneous psychokinesis refers to phenomena occurring entirely outside of controlled laboratory conditions, lacking any experimental oversight. The bulk of these field observations consist of one-time events, such as unexplainable sounds, object movement, and electronic malfunctions. While many anomalies happen only once, a specific subset of cases repeats persistently over time. Parapsychologists classify these repeating cases as recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, or RSPK, the academic classification for what history calls poltergeist activity. Studying RSPK is logistically difficult because these events happen randomly, making it nearly impossible to set up laboratory sensors in advance. To bridge this gap, researchers utilize sociological tools and population surveys to track the frequency of reported experiences. This graph illustrates variations in the prevalence of reported micro and macro PK experiences between self-identified mediums and non-mediums. The consistent volume of these reports across different groups identifies a persistent human experience that warrants formal investigation. These uncontrolled anecdotes serve as a raw data funnel, dictating exactly what researchers must attempt to replicate under laboratory controls. Moving from field reports into a laboratory setting requires a significant tightening of methodology. Macro PK involves large-scale physical effects that a researcher can directly observe with their own senses. Early investigations of macro PK, such as the 1848 Fox sisters case, were heavily flawed attempts to document phenomena in real time. Investigators at the time focused on claims of massive kinetic forces, like the movement of heavy objects and table levitation. By the mid-20th century, researchers began studying individuals under tighter constraints. Subjects like Nina Kulagina were placed in controlled environments, often with their hands restricted, to test claims of object movement or metal bending. However, macro PK studies are vulnerable to error. When human hands and large objects occupy the same space, the possibility of sleight of hand is difficult to eliminate entirely. Because human sensory perception is easily manipulated by stage magic, visual observation is an unreliable scientific metric for these claims. Recognizing these vulnerabilities, parapsychology pivoted away from visible proof toward microscopic, mathematical data. This pivot established micro-PK as the modern cornerstone of experimental research. Micro-PK involves effects that are undetectable to the naked eye, existing only within statistical and mathematical deviations. Researchers use random number generators as the primary tool for conducting precise mind-machine interaction tests. The experiments observe whether human intention can alter the probability of a purely automated output, looking for deviations that defy standard chance. This measurement of subtle statistical influence is also applied to living organisms through bio-PK. Bio-PK is formally referred to as direct mental influence on living systems, or DMELS. These experiments monitor anomalous changes in targets ranging from plant growth rates to human physiological responses over a distance. By relying on imperceptible data deviations, modern parapsychology searches for the isolated signal of mind-matter interaction without the errors of human observation. When an anomaly is measured, researchers must verify that it represents a true psychokinetic event. This verification process is a matter of strict systematic exclusion, funneling raw data through several layers of testing. First, the researcher must rule out all known physical and normal sensory motor processes. If standard physics can explain the event, the result is discarded. Second, the researcher must verify that the subject is not suffering from psychological or neurological pathology. Finally, the experimental design must absolutely prevent any possibility of intentional fraud. The validity of the research relies on the strength of this exclusion filter. If a conventional explanation can breach the design, the entire result is invalidated. The data that survives all three layers of the exclusion process represents a genuine anomaly. Researchers classify this remainder as psi, a scientific placeholder for a yet-to-be-understood human capability. This taxonomy connects chaotic field reports to highly controlled laboratory datasets, creating a unified map of mind-matter interaction. Dissecting the phenomenon into these isolated, testable categories is the only way to measure its mechanics. Parapsychological research functions as a methodical, exhaustive process, mapping the specific points where current models of physics and human consciousness break down.